All right, David.
Hi, David. How you doing?
Not bad. Wee bit of lag, but not much. Let's give Peter a chance to join us. If anybody wants to join us. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Neil.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Arsenal. Brian. If you want to see the comments, David, you need to open up our YouTube box and just turn the volume off.
I will do. Get my phone to you.
Hi, Lenny. Hi, Kerry. Hi, Hugh. Stuart. Julie. Lorna. So, good afternoon, everyone. Today, the Two Davies are going to speak about the First Minister's announcement on Tuesday. And we'll have a look at what was said and the reaction in the press, especially the reaction in the press. So, good afternoon, gents. Watched the How You Gonies yesterday. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Also, well, thumbs up with some, so you did enjoy it. Right, so Tuesday, 2:30 p.m. A wee bit later than advertised, the First Minister announces that she intends to put the legislation for Indie Ref 2 through the House of the Holyrood Parliament, and that she had referred the bill via the Lord Advocate, using the Lord Advocate's reserved power, to the Supreme Court to be a judgment made on whether it is within the competence of the Scottish Parliament to pass such legislation. She also stipulated that it would be a consultative referendum and not something that could be acted on unilaterally. Okay. She then went on to stipulate that if the Supreme Court ruled that it was out with the competence of the Scottish Parliament, that the First Minister would then fight the following general election as a plebiscite election, which basically means that they would run on a single issue, and that issue would be independence. And all hell broke loose in the press. So it did. And the no ye cannies and the wildcat referendum accusations started flying around. So, what did you make it, David?
I was delighted that the announcement was made, and I was delighted that the legislation had been produced. But what I did think was funny was that it was Angus Brendan McNeill that had brought up the idea of the plebiscite election, and that he was shouted down from the rooftops for presenting such a thing. And I even wrote a mini blog regarding plebiscite freedom, and I took pelters for writing that one. But there you go. We've got it as Plan B. If Plan A doesn't work, then Plan B comes in, we run an election, and the single issue on it is, do you want independence, guys? And if you want independence, you vote for one of the pro-independence parties. And a simple majority, as in a normal general election, first past the post, does it. There you go, that's my take on it.
Well, I thought while the press was going into meltdown and shouting, you can't, it's illegal and things like that, I thought the First Minister and John Swinney covered it perfectly yesterday in Good Morning Scotland and on the broadcast media, when John was asked what would be enough to declare, and he said the majority of MPs, and then the First Minister was asked the same question, and she said the majority of the vote. Right? But when you think about it, because it is first past the post, a majority of the vote gives you a majority of the MPs, so they covered themselves. You know, it stops them from turning around and saying No, you didn't get over the 50% mark, because they hadn't said they'd require to get over 50%. What they said was they require to get the majority of MPs and the majority of the vote. I thought the First Minister and John Swinney played a blinder.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I mean, we're now getting the unionists throwing the thing out, well, you need over 50% of the voting electorate to vote for pro-Indy parties. That's a load of nonsense. If you take the Tory party, they've taken control of the UK government, and theirs was 36%. 36% of the entire vote went to the Tories, and they're doing that. Also, if you take the number of people that voted for Brexit, the actual numbers only totaled a certain percentage of the British voting public.
It was only about 40. I think you could Google it, but I think it was as low as 47%, David, or maybe 57%.
Yeah. So the entire turnout was not 100%, and we can't see that at any time, at any election, that it's 100%, because people will just stay in their beds or sat in their armchair and not bother. Why that is, I can't get my head around, but that's beside the point. It's another subject. The whole thing about the vote taking place on the 19th of October 2003, in my mind, there should be no reason why that is not back. The Supreme Court's ability or competence to rule on what is actually international law isn't there. They aren't competent. They're not an international court. They're the highest court in England, yeah, and they were brought into being by Tony Blair, but however, they're not allowed to overrule Scottish law. Yeah.
Yep. The other, apparently there was 48% of the UK electorate turned out to vote in the Brexit referendum, David. So that's the numbers. So 48%, and we find ourselves dragged out of Europe. 62% against. But we can throw a bit of stats about. I still believe that the Supreme Court will rule that it's all right for the Scottish Parliament to run a consultative referendum on that, on the subject. I really do. Then the pressure comes on Westminster after the result of the referendum. I don't see the Supreme Court blocking democracy. But if they do, then the implications for the people of Scotland, Wales, England and Northern Ireland is extreme, because it would put the state above the people in all four nations. Yeah. That's just not acceptable. We're seeing with the draconian laws being introduced down that road that the state's becoming more and more authoritarian. Yeah. And the state is acting like an entity out with democracy. And that applies to England as well. Because if the state can overturn the will of the Scottish people, the Welsh people, the Northern Irish people, it can overturn the will of the English people as well. Yes. Democracy is seriously in dire straits here. Mm-hmm. And anybody in England watching this better wake up. We spoke about the bills that were going through down that road last week. I listed them. And only 3 of them apply in Scotland. It's their rights that are being clamped down on, no ours. Or ours are also being clamped down on, but not to the same extent.
David, why do you think that is? You and I have talked. You've got an interesting answer on this one. Why do you think?
They know the game's a bogey. Democracy can't be denied. They know that one way or another Scotland will. And this idea that they're going to block democracy. If they block one route to democracy, we'll use another route. If they block that route, we'll use the Scottish Parliament. There are many, many routes, and they're all recognised internationally. So I don't think it will be a plebiscite election. I still believe that Westminster will come forward with a Section 30 order because they will want to participate in the referendum. Irrespective of the court ruling, I still think that a Section 30 order will be forthcoming, because pressure's building. And it's not just building for the Scottish people. The Welsh, the Northern Irish and the English people are starting to look at this.
Yeah. Good point. So, all right, let's look a wee bit further on. Let's say we run the referendum or the plebiscite election, whatever, and the answer is yes. The Scottish people give a firm yes, right? So what's the next stage? What it's the morning after the referendum or whatever. What's the next step?
That's where we look for the international community one by one to start recognising us, because that puts a pressure on Westminster to recognise democracy.
Yeah. Okay. Then what do you think? Let's say we're now a year and a half, 2 years, not even 3 years since the referendum yes vote, and Scotland has now declared its independence, right? And several things have happened, such as the British Army is split up into the Scottish regiments, English regiments, so on and so forth. And there's things such as the gold that's held in the Bank of England that backs up the Scottish currency. That somehow is being flitted up the road, right? And we've got all that sort of thing going on. What is going to be the effect on the English psyche? Reference that. What do you think they're going to think?
Well, it's the reason why these draconian laws are being passed, David, because, I mean, it's going to be a real shock to England to realise that they are not all powerful. They are not a great power in the world. And they are basically, they've got a service industry economy which doesn't cover enough to meet their needs. They don't generate enough electricity. They don't have any oil, any gas. Their water supplies are running low. I mean, England has got some real massive problems in their hands, and it's due to mismanagement for Westminster by the Westminster governments in England as well as the other parts of the UK. What will probably happen is there will be civil unrest down that road. But, you know, even if we don't leave the unions, let's say it's a no vote, there'll be civil unrest up this road and all. Because what's coming down there the next decade, when people can't feed their children, they don't sit about. That's why this legislation is underway down that road. Because as we know, when things get really dire, the English people, like the French, will turn to violent protest. We've seen that in the various riots that have happened through my lifetime down that road. You know, so I think that's why these draconian laws are being put in place. But let's not get in front of ourselves. So let's say that a referendum is refused and we go to a plebiscite election, and the return is the majority SNP MPs and the majority of the vote goes to the SNP. Obviously, it's a first past the post system. And then Scotland declares that they want to start negotiations for independence. What happens then? Well, we will see Westminster try anything possible to try and delegitimise the result. They will do their very best to try and delegitimise the result. You can be sure of that.
That's a given. Yeah.
Once again, we're relying on the goodwill of the international community to pile in and recognise the result. Because the more of the international community that piles in and recognises the result, the more and more pressure there is in Westminster to observe the result. So we know that the EU27 are going to bail in and recognise the result. We know that all the Nordic nations are going to bail in and recognise the result. The big one's America, and Joe Biden's no best chuffly stupid down the road there. You know?
What surprises me is that we're well down the Brexit blind alley. You know, we've only got a couple of stages to go before that's it. It's all done. And Great Britain then takes on the position of proper third country status. Now we've got a situation where Europe doesn't really have any, let's say, political or democratic holdback to giving Scotland the support it deserves. We want to be in Europe, and I think it's time that Europe, moved up the seat a bit and said, "Aye, guys, we do support you," and for it to be officially announced by von der Leyen or whoever.
I think once the method that Scotland's going to use to achieve its independence becomes clear to the European Union, they will join in, because they want our energy. They want access to our energy.
Mm-hmm.
They want access to our oil. They want access to our gas. They want access to our renewables. Remember, we've got 25% of Europe's renewable potential here in Scotland.
Yep.
Europe. Sorry?
And our whiskey.
Aye, whiskey, salmon, quality food, which is all being devastated by Brexit and the agricultural bill for England and Wales, which allows Frankenstein foods onto the market. The lowering of food standards so that radioactive food can come in from Fukushima, because they can't get it from Europe anymore. And then we know the crap food standards in Australia, New Zealand, with the hormone beef and lamb. And then we've got of course, the multinationals in America waiting to swoop in and feed us crap and all. So the damage that's being done to Scotland is immense, but the damage that's being done to the UK's reputation in the world by that shower of thieves and carpetbaggers down the road is no real. And denying democracy, a well-established democracy, a democracy which was established under their rules.
Just one thing. Stephen Kelly's put up a really interesting wee question, right? Can we not suspend the Act of Union if we're refused our democracy? Refuse to send our money to London? Well, we couldn't refuse to send our money to London because most people are paid by pay-as-you-earn. It would have to be the employers that refuse to send the money, and then they would be liable. But as far as suspending the Act of Union if our democracy is refused, it's an interesting wee point that Stephen makes. I don't know how it would fly, but there you go.
Well, how it's going to fly is after the plebiscite election, we'll return the majority of the MPs doing that road, then they'll reconvene the Scottish Grand Committee, and they'll suspend the Treaty of Union, and they leave the Parliament, and what happens there is they convene the Scottish Grand Committee like Robin Cook did in '79, and like the English Parliament does when it's passing English votes for English laws, evil, which was supposed to be suspended, but the agricultural bills went through under evil. So there you go. There are routes to be taken, but as I say, it's down to the international community to pile the pressure on. As I say, we know the EU 27 will recognise Scotland. We know the Nordic countries will recognise Scotland. If Joe Biden by then is really pissed off with England because of the NI protocol bill threatening the Good Friday Agreement, because the EU will protect their trade border, so there will have to be a border on the island of Ireland, and that will break the Good Friday Agreement, and that will see the wrath of the Americans hit Westminster. We'll have a trade war with the EU on one side, we'll have the Americans slapping Westminster on the other side. So if we had this election, or if we had the referendum, which I still think will go ahead, I think there's enough Democrats left in that Parliament down that road to put the pressure on. I know they're frightened about losing our resources and the fact that Osborne has set the UK's energy security and future prosperity on that oil and gas that was running out in 2014. We know that for a fact. They've laid it out. With Dominic Raab in the Parliament the other day, on answering Deirdre Brock's question about the fact that Scotland holds all the UK's actual assets, said better together, pooling and sharing. They understand the fact of Scotland.
That's an interesting one, Davey. I actually wrote about that this morning, that this is something that we've got to watch out, because that's now 2 or 3 politicians and commentators I've heard bringing up the same thing about, Scotland is where all the assets are, and we really, really want Scotland to be a part of the United Kingdom. and it's starting to sound like they're saying it's like an abusive spouse telling the other spouse that's got their bag packed and heading out the door and saying, "Don't leave, we won't have enough to pay the rent." That's basically what it is. And it's making us look like a shower of bastards, and we've got to be careful and jump on that. We have got no embarrassment over this whatsoever, because the way Scotland has been treated, it's been a totally abusive relationship. And I assure you, the abuse has been coming from Westminster to Scotland for all these years, right?
No,
and we've got to be careful about this narrative being developed. It's got to be shouted down at every possible thing. I've got one question here, by the way, Davey. I want to bring it in.
Right.
It was from Brian Cunningham, if I can find it. Yeah, there it is there. What we need, UN representatives to supervise the vote count in order to avoid the sort of vote rigging we all witnessed at the 2014 independence count.
Listen, I'm all for international observers, but I want to go back to something else that you were talking about there before I lose the thread. So what were you saying there before you brought the question up?
About the narrative that's been developed.
Oh yes, the narrative that's being developed in the abusive relationship situation. What's really interesting about that is that the English people have been, and this is what comes back to the impact on the English psyche. They have been told for generations, since we struck oil, that Scotland's a poor junkie brother drunk next door. When the whole time, since the North Sea started spewing oil, we have subsidised the whole of the UK, and it's all coming out now in the politicians' statements.
Yeah.
We've even had the House of Lords threatening us with war if we try and take our assets back. You know, being told it's no Scotland's oil, it's ours. You know, some idiot in the House of Lords giving it, we'll fight them for it. That's how desperate England has become. But as I say, democracy will play out. You know, democracy will play out. One way or another, the Scottish people will have their say. Davies' money's on a referendum. I think the Supreme Court is going to surprise people. Whereas there's all these unions thinking, and the commentators are all saying the same thing, the Supreme Court's going to rule it's out with the competence of the Scottish Government. I don't think so. But we'll see. We're expecting that judgment in November or December of this year.
Well, effectively, what they're doing is they're presenting a piece of Scottish law legislation that's rubber stamped by the law lords and handed to the Supreme Court. And really, it should be a case that the Supreme Court cannot argue with that. Maybe they could argue, well, can you change that word round, and can you do this and do that? That's fine. That's syntax.
The bill, David, the bill is not being referred to the Supreme Court for how it's written. It's been referred to the Supreme Court to see if it's in the competency of the Scottish Parliament. And I think because it's a consultative referendum and would require Westminster as well as the Scottish Parliament to action on it, I think the Supreme Court will say, of course you can ask yourself a question. It's an opinion poll, a big opinion poll. Go ahead and ask yourself a question.
But Brexit was an opinion poll.
Yes.
Brexit was a consultative referendum.
They're all consultative. That's the reason here. Every referendum is consultative.
And what follows on at the back of that is the Scottish claim of right, where the Scottish people have spoken, and what the Scottish people want, that's what they get. They get to choose the government that they want. They get to choose the political constitutional setup that they want, right? So therefore, it no longer is just a consultative referendum. It becomes something that is immediately rubber stamped because of I
have to address a point by my good friend John Burgess, and he's absolutely right. In the eyes of the law, there was no vote rigging in 2014 because it was very cleverly done. Empty homes and second homes were given ballot papers. So if you were living in England and you transferred your place of residence to your Scottish second home, then you go to vote. There's more than one. There's legitimate ways to rig a vote, John. Like the way that Westminster Parliament's doing it at the moment. I don't know if you're aware of this, John, but at the moment, you've just had the 3 million people kicked off a voters register with a voter ID being introduced. You've got the boundaries bill to come, which is going to move constituencies' boundaries round to favour the Conservatives. And the Conservative Party have just taken the Electoral Commission into government. Because if you remember, John, in the 2017 referendum, 30 Conservatives were slapped by the Electoral Commission and fined by the Electoral Commission for overspending on their election, on their campaigns. That's called buying elections, John. So there are legal ways. There are ways to rig elections and referenda without false ballot papers and things like that, John. So legally, technically, you're right. There wasn't any rigging, but there was a hell of a lot of rigging going on. A hell of a lot. Well, it was a 2-year campaign, and once the people in England had moved their permanent residency to their second homes in Scotland, even though we're lying empty all the time, they got votes.
Well, that work that was done on Argyll and Bute to cover that of the postal vote and all the rest of it, right? That definitely proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that there was rigging going on.
Yeah, but it was legal rigging. It was legal rigging because the campaign was that long. They only had to move their permanent residency for 6 months to be qualified to vote. So,
well, yeah, look, we're not going to rerun the 2014 referendum.
No, we're talking about what Nicola Sturgeon stated and what the connotations are that go with it.
Yeah.
To say, I'm still firmly fixed on the idea that there will be a referendum next year. I think there's enough Democrats and enough pressure down that road. We'll see Westminster come to the table because they'll want to say. As to the Supreme Court, I think it might surprise people. I could be wrong, but I think it will surprise people. I think the Supreme Court, because the Referendum Act 2019 is already passed into law, I think the Supreme Court will rule that it's perfectly legitimate for Scotland to hold an opinion poll on anything, but it would take Westminster and the Scottish Government to sanction it. And I think the referendum will be a goer.
Right. I think a future Two Davies show should cover how we get the educational bit out, as in telling people how to look for possible screwing around with the vote. We were talking about this just a few weeks ago,
David, we can address that once we find out what method it's going to be. If the Supreme Court says no referendum, then without Westminster sanctions, then it will be the plebiscite election. Then we can look at it when that comes up, because there's a different voting system.
Now, here's a good question. How does the plebiscite take place? What I mean by that is, what are the various ways that it could take place? Would it be Boris Johnson decided to run an election? Or could the First Minister actually just say, right, I'm closing Parliament and there will be an election. I'm announcing an election. Would that be...
There is absolutely no reason why dissolving the Scottish Parliament and holding the Scottish election wouldn't be enough as a plebiscite election. It'd be harder to get the majority, but we've done that already. We've won the majority.
Yeah.
So you could run it as a Scottish election. But it's more likely going to be a Westminster election, because it's 59 Westminster MPs that have taken our sovereignty to Westminster each time there's a general election, and it would be the MPs that would be making a declaration down there to tell them that the game's a bogey. So it would most likely be the general election. And as to pushing the papers this morning about confusion or how it would work, it's dead simple. The majority of the vote and the majority of the MPs. Mr. Swinney and Miss Sturgeon has laid that out quite clear. The fact that the Banana Republic and the Pravda are trying to set the rules for the election, and the result is absolutely mental. But even if it is 50% plus one, we're sitting at 49% yes in the polls, or 50-50 in the polls. And we've got all this horror coming down the bloody road to Westminster.
Yep.
We think we're feeling the pain now. Wait until the energy price cap rises by the 51% in October.
Yep.
We'll get spiraling inflation, but that will slow as the economy contracts. We might get stagflation, or we might see inflation come down again because nobody will be spending into the economy. There was a report out for the Joseph Rowntree Foundation yesterday. 30% of Scots are cutting back on essentials. That means food, heat, fuel, essentials. We're already cutting back. 30% are already cutting back on these essentials. You throw another 51% on the price of energy come October. We've got the rest of Brexit still to happen, which the UK government is trying to kick into the long grass while they're having a fight with the EU. Mario Covid said yesterday I reported on it, so it was Wednesday, said that the EU will not negotiate with the United Kingdom while that bill's on the table because it's like putting a gun to their heads. It's threatening them with the stability of Northern Ireland when it's actually Westminster that is threatening the stability of Northern Ireland. Mm-hmm. So it's at 50-50 the now, with the misery that's coming down the line, though it's starting to hit the people who voted no in their wallets.
Oh, I can assure you that Leslie and I we're okay. She's a professional, I'm a professional, and we manage, right? We're not minted, but at the same time we manage. But come winter, when those electricity and gas bills go up the way, and then it start getting into the cold months when you're using it, that's the point. That's the point. The real pain is going to happen. Here's
my friend John's back again, right? There's no way Scotland will vote yes for independence. We have been laughing about it here in England. We are not taking it seriously. Down here, as we know, it will be a no. If you know, it's a no then, John. You didn't know that the English people, 49% of English people pulled for independence for England. It seems to be that your knowledge of what's going on here in Scotland is a very limited. But you're in London. As to the people in England laughing, we don't really care.
That's right.
I mean, you have some. I mean, this is the arrogance again. You're not taking it serious. As if we care if you take it serious. We don't really care. The people here in Scotland are sovereign. And democracy will play out. So, John, it doesn't really matter that you are laughing in London. We don't care. Westminster isn't all powerful. I've told you before. Scotland's not a belonging. And the international community's pressure will mount on Westminster.
John.
Because Westminster's already a rogue. I mean, the UK is already a rogue state.
David, let me just get a word in here to John. John, it might not matter to you. You might be having a good laugh about it. I do suggest that you watch the Andrew Marr soliloquy, we'll call it, where he was talking about if you're not noticing about Scottish independence, after it happens, if you live in England, you certainly will notice. So I'd recommend you pick that up on YouTube and have a good watch. That'll educate you a bit. Because Andrew Marr, as you know, when he worked for the BBC, his lips were tied. Now he can say what he likes. So I do suggest you watch that. Enough said. Have we got any other questions?
I don't know. So let's round up because we're getting to the 30-minute mark. And as you know, I'm working tonight, David. So let's say, in fact, we're over 30. We're on 34. So plan A is to have a referendum with a Section 30 order. Plan B is to have a referendum without a Section 30 order. Plan C is to have a plebiscite election. One way or another, the people of Scotland will have their say. How the abusive idiot next door behaves when the divorce papers are served, well, we've seen what happened with the way they behave towards the European Union. The arrogance, oh no, we're your equal sort of thing. When there's 450 million aim and only 65 million aim, they're going to try the same stunt with us. But as I say, the international community will recognise us. So, thanks for a link to the. What's up, John? Do you people in London don't know how to use a search engine? He wants a link to the Andrew Marsh program, the Andrew Marsh LBC program there. But it would appear that John, who's all knowledgeable in things in Scotland, doesn't know how to use a search engine. Right,
Be nice, David. Be nice.
I am being nice. David, you and I did this in the 2000 and 2012. People kept asking us for links, and we spent all our time finding them and putting them up. I'm not treating people like idiots this time. They're all grown-ups. They know how to use a search engine.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I'm not spoon-feeding people anymore. You know, you tell them what it was he needs to go and look at. You can go to GB News where all the Gammons are and have a look at what Murdo Fraser had to say and all. And then you can have a look at what was said by Dominic Raab in Westminster when he answered Deirdre Brock the other day. So, I mean, there's plenty of it out there. Right, I guess we better wind this up, folks. So let me try and get through that again. Plan A is a referendum with Westminster's no permission, but Westminster participating. Plan B is hopefully the Supreme Court will allow us to hold that referendum on our own. Plan C, if none of that comes to pass, then it'll be a plebiscite election and it'll be up to the international community to bail in and recognise Scotland to put the pressure on Westminster to abide by. And of course, it'll be up to our MPs to then call the Scottish Grand Committee and tell them the game's a bogey. All right. So that's the programme for the day, folks. I hope you found it interesting. I hope you found it informative. It was just a chat show, because that was the idea, a chat show and shoot it with you guys. And we've managed to get a few of your comments in. We'll remember to get more and more anyway. So, and once again, John, you are a valuable contributor to this show, John. So please come back again next Thursday at 4 o'clock. All right. So, thanks very much, folks. I'd like to say your goodbyes, David, before I shut the Zoom down.
All right, folks. God bless you. Thanks very much for coming.
Right, stay there. I'm only going to shut the live stream down. I'm not shutting the Zoom down.
Right, okay.
Wait a minute, pull it up.